Walt, welcome back from Dallas. You went into, as I say, enemy territory. And I don't want to know, before we get into this, did you wear your Eagles jersey into Jerry Jones' world?
I was very respectful.
Oh, why not?
I was very respectful.
Okay. But the other thing I need to know before we get into autonomy markets is the kicker for the Ravens on the Eagles payroll.
That was not the reason the Eagles were successful against the Ravens, as I'm sure everyone knows. Saquon Barkley plays a huge role in that. Thank you to the New York Giants.
Great pickup for you. Disaster for the New York Giants, as we've seen. Now to autonomy markets, the good stuff. It was been a busy week in the autonomy markets. Lo and behold, Tesla released FSD 13.2. WholeMarsBlog got it. Omar, we're going to get into that later. He got a copy of that. May Mobility expanded in Japan with Toyota. And most importantly, what I'm really excited about, because I called it in episode 8 on October 22nd, Waymo has officially announced they expanded to Miami. We called it here on Autonomy Markets. We're ahead of the market. Walt, what are your thoughts on Waymo's expansion into the Magic City?
Well, you called it, so congrats on that. What I'm more surprised at, or mostly surprised at, is the stock reactions today by Uber and Lyft, which have been down like 5% on this news. I mean, not to devalue your prediction, but is it really surprising that Waymo was going to expand to more markets in 2025? Maybe what was surprising to some of the Uber investors was the hope that they would be included as a co-partner, that's the narrative that's been pitched by Dara and the Uber team, and frankly those that are very bullish, is that the way to succeed is to partner, because you can't have the scale. I think this has been argued by other talking heads, let's call it, that are supporters in the rideshare, that like, oh no, autonomy can't succeed because of having those peak hour times. Maybe not full replacement yet, but certainly creates an existential threat to these companies. So that is, I think, the more surprising thing, is that they didn't partner with an existing platform.
Which, in the early episodes, I was an Uber bull. Now I'm neutral. I'm beginning to question the value of the Uber partnership for Waymo. Does Waymo even need Uber? Because if you look at the Uber relationship, is currently in a small degree in the Phoenix market, the Atlanta market, the Austin market. Not nearly as big of a market as Miami, Los Angeles will be.
I don't necessarily think they need to make that decision right now, because we'll see, they'll do different things in different markets. And I think, going back to those that don't necessarily listen to every episode, I'll reiterate a prediction that I have, which is I think you'll see a Waymo Lyft market as well at some point in 2025. So they can test stuff now as they continue to scale up. Let's point out something else here, Grayson, is like we talked about the timing of LA and maybe the concern of not getting enough Jaguars, or if they'd had to come up with some replacement for Zeekr, not having the scale to do additional markets just because they wanted to add more vehicles in their existing markets. If they're willing to plow ahead here, certainly they're confident about what the roadmap looks like to source the vehicles required to have some basic service. Now, let's put this in perspective, some context here. They're going to start in 2025, not really offer service for users until 2026. So there is some timeline here, but I think it's an exceptional kind of sign that Waymo is lining things up, feels comfortable with the supply of the vehicles to expand to additional markets, feels comfortable to not have every additional market be a partner with Lyft and Uber. But I'll stop short there and say that's not necessarily definitive that Uber and Lyft are not going to play a critical role in Waymo's future.
You know what else happens in 2026? The Hyundai Ioniq 5s come online for Waymo. The timing is very interesting. Mr. Sundar Pichai was at the New York Times Dealbook Conference this week, said Waymo will be announced 10 cities in 2025. That's 3 more to go. What do you think they're going to be? Does my prediction of Nashville come true? Or it seems this Eastern swing going on there? Because Mr. Pichai said robust city. So that tells you a lot of people, a lot of traffic.
Yeah, the other part of robust that I hear from investors is robust weather. And Miami, they get a lot of rain, and I know that's a challenge, certainly for other companies that we've seen. They don't get snow. And I think the ultimate market clearly is New York. And I think I would guess and believe that internally at Waymo, the priority to try and get into New York somewhere in one of the boroughs is high on the list. I know you've addressed the regulatory issues that exist. We have a new administration coming in at the federal level. That still may not help with New York. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. That will be, I think, the big shocker to investors, at least, in that everyone's like, well, they have a long way to go before they can do it in the snow of New York. So can you imagine at some point this year if Waymo dropped, hey, yeah, we're going to start in X borough in New York City? That would, again, put a lot of, I think, questions or start to accelerate some of the concerns that exist for Uber and Lyft.
That could happen in the Trump administration if a federal framework goes in that preempts.
Which takes time.
It takes time, but it could happen. In the snow aspect, Kodiak's been testing their vehicle in the snow for defense, and that's been working very well. I'm not going to make this a prediction, but I will say that it is a possibility based on previous testing. This is when John Krafchick was CEO of Waymo. Waymo was doing testing in and around Naples, Florida. Naples, Florida from Miami with no traffic is about an hour and a half shot across Alligator Alley. Perhaps Naples, Florida comes online. In northern Naples and Collier County, there is a proving ground that Waymo has tested over the years. So perhaps that could be a follow-on city, very similar to the way that Waymo has rolled out in San Francisco, going to cities that are close by.
Grayson, you're familiar with these cities. Let's forget about Naples for a second. Tell me about Miami. In that, can you offer service in Miami without utilizing highways, freeways, whatever you happen to call them down there in Florida where you live?
Yes, you have causeways. So if you're going to go from Brickell to the beach, you go over a causeway. It's not a freeway or a highway. So very, very easy driving environment. And I'll get chastised for saying easy.
But hold on. But does that define as a highway? Because remember, one of the big unlocks that we're still waiting for in terms of Waymo is being able to get utilized on what you call a causeway, a freeway, a highway. Is that necessary, or can they operate in 2025 and 2026 with still remaining on the local roads of downtown Miami?
They will go on the causeway. Argo AI was successfully able to do it. Zoox is testing there. They're successfully able to do it. When I say causeway, to be all transparent, you're maybe going to go 20 miles an hour, 22 miles an hour, just because of the extreme amount of traffic. The big question that concerns me about Miami, are you going to go all the way down to Homestead? Are you going to stay in Brickell? Are you going to go to North Beach, South Beach? Are you going to go all the way up to Surfside? How is Waymo strategically going to place the fleets because of the insane traffic? You go to Art Basel, you're at the beach, and you're going to go to Brickell for dinner. It could take you an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes if you want to go there, or you want to go to the art district. So placing the fleet will be very strategic.
Yeah, so my prediction then would be, and love to hear yours, they ain't going to do that in 2025. They will restrict it to some amount of local driving in Miami. And as they continue to do employee testing on the highways, freeways, whatever they want to call them, in California, which I think there's certainly been plenty of reports about that this unlock will come out, probably in the original markets before you get to Miami, and that will be a later unlock. So I think initially my guess is that these tests will be in just local streets and not even bothering with hour and a half long trips.
If you do not connect Brickell to the beach, you do not have a service in Miami, point blank. So I will give you the opposite prediction. The ODD will be Brickell in Miami Beach. Otherwise, it's not a functioning service, point blank.
Good. We have differing opinions here. So will you be very disappointed then are you going to get on this podcast in 3, 4, 5 months, whatever, and we start to see indications like, this is ridiculous. If you can't take me to Brickell, that's not a real trial, and really take it to Waymo when we learn the real answer to these two predictions?
I'll just call it as I see it. You get me hyped up. You crank up the button on the back of the kid's toy, and I get wild up. So yes, I'll be very, very blunt and very vocal if it doesn't make sense.
I do have that impact on people. But you can make that argument today if for people in San Francisco, like, okay, get me to the airport, get me on a freeway, or take me around, whatever that road is on the circumference of San Francisco. Get me over a bridge. I want to go to Sausalito. Do those things. You could have made the same arguments, but people have still been generally happy. It's certainly been a productive, I don't want to call it a trial, but initial service that Waymo has done in San Francisco without necessarily. But look, I've in Dallas today, I've had a lot of discussions with people in Dallas who are like, no fucking way you can do Dallas without being able to get on a freeway. Just getting even, within the downtown area, you're always kind of on-ramping onto a freeway. So I think certain cities, New York not being one of them, it'll be necessary to get that unlock for Waymo.
Waymo does not need freeways in Miami to be successful unless they want to connect Joe Robbie Stadium. Don't care what anybody says. It's not Hard Rock. It's Joe Robbie Stadium and certain aspects of the airport.
And this is just because you're defining causeway as not that incremental unlock, as like to get into Brickell, you're not saying that that is a freeway type experience. Got it. Okay.
All it is a bridge going over water and you're going 20 miles an hour, but the technical definition is a causeway.
Okay, that should be fine.
My FSD does it no problem. Easy.
We'll get to that later. You just put a pin. I know you're anxious to get to Tesla FSD 13.2. Let's put a pin in that. We still have some things to talk about with regard to Waymo. Let's get back to when this podcast started, episode 1, 2, or 3, for those of you willing to go back into the library, which is already getting deep. And I was, originally skeptical. You were the super defender saying, like, absolutely not. Uber is going to be required. Like, developing the app is a thing. And this is ultimate protection. Again, announcing you're doing Miami over the next year or two doesn't mean that they don't come back to Uber and Lyft in these markets as they start to hit scale. But what's kind of grade your perception more recently?
I'm beginning to realize there's no loyalty for a rideshare service. You're going to go to the best price. Waymo has clearly figured out how to operate the Waymo One app. I did not feel early on they were as advanced as they were. The Uber One program was a complete waste of money, and I canceled it. I didn't get any value out of that. And now I'm on the Lyft Pink program. The simple reason why, my credit card from JP Morgan gives me a free 2-year pass and 10x points. And it's cheaper than Uber. Okay, so I'm going to use that service. The thing that I really want to see that would tell me that Waymo's going to go it alone from the app standpoint, if Waymo has a credit card integration with Chase, with American Express, that's going to build a lot of loyalty there, especially if they start integrating a points program and bonus points for using that.
So again, let's bring up the argument, though, in terms of, well, there's the scale argument, but your original argument, and which, by the way, neither of us, I think, agree with, because I think if you ultimately, when you truly get to scale and you drive down the cost of that automobile to a price where a fleet manager can have the excess inventory sitting available somewhere that doesn't need to be utilized, 24/7 in order to get a return out of it. I think you can address those scale in the long term. But your issue at the time was just that the app development, like the smarts of like matching rides and scheduled rides and all of these things weren't easy to do. And so are you now believing or devaluing the impact of the Uber and the Lyft apps in terms of matching all of this supply, the demand, which they claim is such a Herculean feat?
As it relates to Waymo, yes. As it relates to the rest of the industry, uncertain. I could see a future where I own a personally autonomous vehicle not named Tesla, and that you have the ability to have an Uber Turo-like service where you put it on Uber and Uber puts it out. I could see that as a big future for Uber, but that's still a decade away. At this point, Waymo has clearly proven to me and proven to the market, I might add, that they can do it. The rest of the autonomous vehicle industry, I'm unsure at this point.
Yeah, I think you and I may have flip-flopped on this one. I think I'm more believer in the Uber and Lyft app. No disrespect to the engineers at Google, but I think there is some level of sustainability there. The other thing I think I would just want to address is on the scale issue, having those cars, even if they're not cheap enough to have cars sitting idle waiting for Friday night rush hour or whatever it is you don't necessarily have to be a complete replacement to Uber to have a material impact on Uber's business. Meaning that, there's a lot of airport rides, scheduled rides, things like that Uber has already identified as growth areas, high margin areas, longer trip areas, that if market share now shifts to autonomous fleets that emerge, even though those autonomous fleets might fail the end consumer on the very busiest nights, that still hurts economics for a business that is not really a high margin business overall when you really think about GMV to what drops down to the bottom line. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a complete replacement.
And then there's the insurance aspect. Waymo self-insures through Alphabet's captive. It's a lot cheaper from what I've gathered based on what Uber is paying. That can become a differentiating factor. Waymo could become widely more profitable than Uber down the line based on that one item alone.
Yeah, I mean, again, age-old debate in terms of autonomy helping with price. Still getting a lot of interesting data points on like how many safety drivers are sitting behind the curtain at Waymo in San Francisco and LA. I hear numbers all over the place, and I've heard some very aggressively negative numbers and some positive ones. But at the end of the day, like if you in a mature market can get someone sitting behind the curtain in a data center somewhere for every 5 cars, that's a labor reduction. There's the insurance reduction. They still don't necessarily need to price that way because it will be, I think, a superior service. If the fleet is managed properly, whether they do that on their own or outsource that, that could be a new opportunity, fleet management, which we'll get to, I think in part 2 of this. But I think you can charge a higher price and get a higher margin. Maybe in the long term, you can utilize that. And having the lowest cost service is going to be long term what you want to be in this low margin business. So these are long term advantages, but not necessarily stuff in the near term.
The best long term advantage that Waymo has over Uber and Lyft, consistency of product. What you're going to get, what the experience is going to be like, what the comfort level is going to be. You're not going to get a driver smoking a cigarette. You're not going to get a driver that thinks he's a race car driver, there's Mario Andretti. You're getting a consistent experience, and that can become a big defining factor as we move into the future and Waymo scales up.
So that's a good segue into part 2 of Uber in this, which is, it was pretty high profile in the announcement, the relationship that they have with Moove for sleep management. Moove is a company whose largest presence, is outside of the United States. I think it's an African-based company. Nigerian-based company. And like we know, Uber's fleet management is, I think, India and I believe it's Saudi Arabia. Could be wrong. Fleet management is going to be probably an important part of the U.S. experience. There seems to be, from Uber's standpoint, and I guess now Waymo, like they don't want to do this. But if you want to deliver a quality of service, is this something that you can trust a third-party provider to have? And if this is a market opportunity, why are they needing to go to a Nigerian-based company to do fleet management? Why are there not more fleet management companies that are quickly emerging to take advantage and be a part of this value equation that's going to exist?
It's complex and it's expensive. The question becomes, who becomes the rider system for fleet management for autonomous vehicles? Mike Palencia from Rider Buddy, I know you listen every week. If you think it's Rider, we'll have you on to say why it should be Rider. And going back in the early days, if you look at it, it was originally going to be Avis. It was going to be Hertz. It was going to be the rental car companies that were going to do it. And that's kind of all died down. You're starting to see newer specialized companies move in. But the interesting thing, staying on the Moove theme, moving in, Moove is taking over the fleet operations, the cleaning, the charging, the maintenance in Phoenix. And they're also going to do it in Miami. And Uber has Atlanta. Is Waymo just dating around, getting ready to say, "Ooh, I'm going to go on with you. I'm going to go with you," and then eventually we're going to have a breakup as we're teenagers? Oh, we're going to break up now. Well, where is this all going?
Like I just said, I don't think this market exists, right? I think Uber has been pretty visible about this on their earnings calls that fleet management, they want more fleets on their network, and and you're going to need fleet managers. This is a third-party situation. I think Lyft might be more willing to do it in-house. It's early days, Grayson, and I think if you're a company like Uber and Lyft or Waymo, you want to sprinkle your money around and hope there's competition and hope there's incremental capital or incremental investment in people growing. And then over time, you decide like, okay, are they a fine partner to have? Like the wireless companies have tower operators. They're fine just paying them the leases. It's not great because they get 3% rate increases locked in every year. Anytime they want to change anything, the price goes up. You might be fine with that if you have a stable partner, or you may want to take it in-house. I think at the end of the day, if Waymo kind of understands that they might not necessarily be the only game in town, it might be better to have it as a third party so that that fleet manager can offer me a lower cost because they're cleaning my fleet, they're cleaning Uber's fleet, they're cleaning Lyft's fleet, and whoever else is out there. It's interesting that the rental companies, like, where did they go in this? They disappeared. You would think, given the locations near the airport's not a bad spot for a depot. They've got the expertise in cleaning the cars. Not sure why they wouldn't be kind of an obvious initial play in this, or that they haven't emerged.
Well, this is where it comes back to the standardization of depots that I've advocated for a long time. If you have a standard to clean the LiDAR, to clean the cameras, what does it all look like? You standardize it, you train a workforce, you can deploy that workforce, and then you don't have to be outlet employees and deal with all the benefits there. On the rental car side, let's not forget Gil West, who's a wonderful gentleman, former COO of Cruise, is now CEO of Hertz. Perhaps Mr. West uses his expertise from what he learned at Cruise and bring it into Hertz once he can figure out the EV debacle that unfortunately he inherited when he became CEO. Because looking back at Mr. West's pedigree, he was CEO of Delta Airlines under Ed Bastian. They turned the airline around and completely optimize it. So perhaps he takes Hertz in that direction.
Now let's really go into what I would call Grayson land and really think big.
Ooh, good.
You can take that as a compliment or an insult, however you wish.
Listen, I got a hat now. I'm making autonomy great.
If we go back to some of Elon's dream the dream, buy your Tesla, whatever, buy your FSD, and then let your car go out and pick up that teenager who's going to puke in it, and make some money. You're going to make money owning a Tesla. Again, clearly a need for a fleet manager so that before that car comes home, it gets sent somewhere to get cleaned up before it goes back to you. So you can have an Airbnb model of cars in the long term. Again, getting back to this being important in this. And again, the other issue of this is if you're Uber, why not develop fleet management? Why let this to be a third party? Maybe this is a way for you to continue to stranglehold your relationship with what might be in the future autonomous fleets, where they say when Uber goes, in the future, Waymo starts taking off, they get scale, and Uber says, well, I'm the best you can get for fleet management across the country. So if you want, we're going to bundle it. We're going to give you fleet management, and we're also going to give you in the peak hours, we can send humans, and they play a more important part in that value chain. Why trust third parties to do this? I get it's a low margin business, but it could be a potentially strategic asset for where this industry is going.
The cleaning part, you forgot the most important aspect of it: disinfecting the vehicle.
I've seen these. I've seen some of these fulfillments, and yes, they have good agents and disinfectants. I've got some recommendations if your car gets dirty on what to do. What you're also saying, power is another big one, depending on whether the autonomous industry continues to stick with having to use EVs, which I'm not sure why that has to be a thing, especially if you go to highways and longer trips. But if you stick with EVs, I see this, we have this issue with AI, with data centers, getting power. I was just at a fleet where in order to get power, they brought in gas, and they've got a generator sitting there in order to charge up all of these EVs in the fleet, because it takes 11, 12 months to get the utility company to upgrade the grid. So, even the power in and of itself, if these fleets are going to be electric, is going to be another critical asset. There's companies in telecom, which they're getting Amazon and Microsoft and Google to pay them for fiber and things just because it's a time to market. They happen to have conduit in the ground. People are paying because power happens to be there. These are challenges that existentially exist in what's a dirty part of the value chain of how this is all going to work.
Permitting is a big issue from the electrification and the substations and all the rights of ways. And we go down a rabbit hole from the regulatory environment. Back to the vehicles and putting the vehicles in fleets when they're fully autonomous. Talk to a police officer. You learn a lot. You really, truly do. And we're very proud to support the police. Drugs in vehicles. That opens up a whole can of legal worms. If you have drugs in vehicles, if there's somebody snorting blow in there. Dead serious. You have to think through these elements. If you want to think about autonomy in a different direction, go speak to Brett Favia over at Kodiak. Go speak to Bart Teeter over at Bot. Go talk to Gary McCarthy at Aurora. These gentlemen will tell you things that you would have never thought of that they're going to have to overcome, and you're going to need somebody with specialty to overcome that. It's going to happen. Listen, it's Miami.
Unfortunately, I can think of a lot of things that can happen in cars where there's no driver there. But there are cameras, people. Remember, there's cameras in the car.
Yes, but remember, Scarface is from Miami. Yeah, in the yo. I mean, it's coming. Yeah, so the Teslas, every Tesla comes with a bed, and you can put on the fireplace mode, and it puts on Al Green and Marvin Gaye, and we can leave that to everybody's imagination because we're G-rated here. But you know where that's going. You sell a vehicle with a bed and with the fireplace, and Al Green, the Reverend, by the way, and Marvin, he's got it going on.
This is why I prefer the Zoox toaster oven, because there's nice long benches, that are there.
Oh, I caught your mind in the gutter.
Benches, I said, benches. But there are cameras in these vehicles. So again, so congrats obviously to the Waymo team for announcing another market. What's interesting is when you mentioned earlier Sundar speaking and talking about a couple more markets that we should all expect in 2025 to be announced. We'll play the clip, but he was very, I think, positive towards Tesla. Play that clip now.
When do you think Waymo's everywhere? I mean, we've been talking about, I think last time you were here, we talked about autonomous vehicles. And others, including Elon, have talked about them being on the roads a lot sooner than they are now.
I mean, Tesla's making amazing progress too. Look, I think, we are in 6 to 7 cities already by the end of this year. We've always it's an area where we have let safety and our metrics guide. Mm-hmm. But I think we are already in the process. May I just walk through the scaling up? I think in the US, by next year, we'll be in 10 cities robustly, right? And in 10 of the major markets. So I think we are making good progress.
And who do you think of as the biggest competition in that space?
I think, obviously, Tesla is the leader in this space. So I think it looks to me like, Tesla, Waymo, I would say those are the top two.
As you can see, he's basically saying he didn't mention Zoox, didn't mention Cruise, didn't mention Wave. Obviously, they're a little different approach. But in terms of the fleets, talked about Tesla as the leader in autonomy, and which is interesting because a lot of the people that are anti-Tesla would say that, when they speak to anyone at Waymo, they're like, oh, that's never going to work. That's never going to work. Well, here's the CEO of Google basically saying they are a leader. And on top of that, we've had early releases of FSD 13. I like to call it FSD 13. You want to add the .2? Fine. FSD 13.2. We know at least one person that's been posting videos. I assume we can trust that these videos are true. And, guys, obviously super bullish on Tesla in general, but has been very positive about the change on 13. Thoughts on either of those things?
Mr. Pichai is 100% correct. The market is clearly evolving for autonomous driving from a passenger side to a two-horse race. And then you're going to have a second tier of companies that will open up personal autonomous vehicles, and you will have a second tier of robotaxis. But right now, the market is clearly evolving. And for the individuals that don't think Tesla works, I'll say the same thing that I've said over and over and over again that I've said to large fund managers, I've said to individuals. If you don't believe it, go buy the vehicle, live with it. And if you don't want to go that far, go to the showroom. They will give you an hour. You might even get 2 if you're lucky. And try FSD. It truly does work. 13.2 FSD, the big 13, and I'm going to call it. No more having to ever touch the wheel. I'm in my driveway. I hit grocery store, wherever I'm going. It'll back out of my driveway, take me the whole way there and park. No more having to back out of my driveway, start the vehicle to go. It will start from a standstill.
Right. So for people let me just interrupt you. For people that have not used full self-driving, what you have to do now is start the car and get it going, and basically start the navigation and hit the lever on your car to start the full self-driving. Now you basically can just sit in there, press a button, and it does all these initial. It's almost like I remember the old days, they used to roll the car down the hill to get it started. That's the way the old FSD worked. Now it just starts right from the get-go, which is fine. But I think the additional improvements, Grayson, that we've seen is it's driving more naturally. And there's different speed variations as well.
Hurry's great on the highway. Oh my God, the thing is amazing. And the big difference now, FSD 13 can go in reverse. It can back up. That's a huge difference.
That's great. On those videos that we've said, is it the WholeMarsBlog? If you haven't seen them, I would check them out. The other thing he did was he went from point A to point B on Waymo as well as, with his Tesla and FSD. And, again, we have to trust his subjective opinion on the quality of the ride, which he said was superior in the Tesla. But it's undeniable that it got there much faster. 15 minutes. I think he said it was 40 minutes for this route that he selected. Why is that? Is that because the Waymo just was avoiding going on the highways? Was it indecisiveness at taking certain routes? What was the reason for that you could tell?
Omar's route was, Omar's a listener. So Omar, thank you for listening, and thank you for being a newsletter subscriber. We'll start with that. Omar went from a Vaughn's parking lot, which looked to be mid-city, perhaps in the mid-Wilshire area of LA, to Santa Monica. There was one individual in the Tesla, one individual in the Waymo. I'm assuming it was Omar was in the Tesla. Unsure of that. He can verify that, and we'll verify that in another individual at the same time. The exact time was 15 minutes and 40 seconds for the Tesla, 42 minutes and 51 seconds for the Waymo. Big difference. It went on the Santa Monica freeway. The Tesla, the Waymo didn't. We sit here, we debate, you and I speak to engineers, developers developing software. Oh, highway's hard. The Tesla works on the highway. It works fine. It's the perception. Well, Tesla's camera only. I'm becoming less and less convinced of what's causing this around if they're hiding behind perception when the Tesla works really well. So what is the cause that the Waymo vehicles have not been able to scale up to highways? I don't think it's what individuals suspect. I'm really starting to challenge this and question this because the Teslas on the freeways work phenomenally. They actually work better on the freeways in most cases than they do on the surface streets. Why is it backwards for Waymo? And Tesla's catching up. As we said earlier, Mr. Pichai is correct, and I will make a very, very bold prediction. FSD 15 will be the first pass of FSD that will be fully autonomous. That's how good it's getting.
So there it is. That Grayson bulled up on Tesla. I love it. I respect it. But in the case of Waymo, I don't know if we know the answers. It's possible it's an internal decision, perhaps to be more safe than maybe what internally, how they move forward at Tesla. In Tesla's case, there's literally should still be a driver there, with their hands on the wheel or close enough, as opposed to Waymo where there's literally no driver. So you're going to move. But I understand the skepticism, which just shows that when in fact Waymo does unlock freeways and starts offering it in these markets, even if it's, cuts 40 minutes down to 20, and that's still slower than 15 minutes for Tesla on the same route. That's still a huge milestone for the industry and a huge, unlock and potential incremental risk for Uber and Lyft. So then now the question, Grayson, is in terms of predictions, because it seems like I got you good and fired up today, pressing your buttons pretty good. What's the prediction for, and I think we've talked about this on last, but we can always revise predictions for when Waymo does get to that point where, the regular Waymo users can hop on those highways or freeways.
Mid-25, starting in the Phoenix market, followed by the LA market. I would say mid-2025.
Okay, so if it's mid-25, how much does it then close the gap in the Omar test of 40 minutes to 15 minutes?
Plus or minus 4 to 5 minutes on each side.
And so why is that the case? Because now if they can take the highways, why do you still think Tesla will outperform in terms of time?
Well, no, let's be careful on outperform. No, it's either one of them could be plus or minus 4 to 5 minutes with each other.
Oh, I thought you just meant that the differential, like 40 minutes goes to 35, which is still much longer than 15. So. Okay.
The Tesla ride was 15 minutes and 40 seconds. The Waymo ride could be 15 minutes and 40 seconds plus or minus 4 to 5 minutes. Same thing for the Tesla, plus or minus 4 to 5 minutes. Depends on perhaps crashing on the freeway, red lights, routing. There's all the human factors that go into that.
Everyone's going to have a subjective opinion until this thing is released more broadly. You and I are continuing to wait for our updates. So Elon, if you're listening, send us our updates, please, or anyone at Tesla, send us our updates. I would say that in my experience is Waymo is a much more comfortable ride than Tesla FSD 12 dot whatever I have right now. Maybe 13 changes that, and I'm going to be happy to report back here with my subjective opinion on that when that happens, as I'm sure you will as well.
Well, let's be honest. The Tesla FSD is not fully autonomous yet. Waymo is fully autonomous now. That is the big differentiator. At some point, I believe Tesla will achieve full autonomy. They're not there yet. Right now, the only true full autonomy operator operating anywhere in the world is Waymo. When I look at operating anywhere in the world with the Moove deal, and Mr. Pichai hinted at this in his interview with Anders Ross Sorkin at the Deal Book, do we see a global expansion perhaps in late 2025, early 2026? Because I'm just paraphrasing Mr. Pichai here. He was hinting at a global expansion.
Well, that's a great question. And I think the same question will go for Elon. I mean, just because we talk about FSD here and we're looking, I think, forward to when there will be, it's the first FSD fleet, let's call it, in a city. I think there's been discussions of that in I think it was Palo Alto, right? When that announcement hits, that's going to be another kind of big milestone, right? But that could be anywhere, and that could be in countries that that Elon wants to seed some better relationship with, or that those countries want a better relationship with Elon, which is, I think things have certainly flipped since the election, and maybe that's the issue where people are like, hey, Elon, come to our country, do your FSD trial here, send us 1,000 Teslas with safety drivers or not with safety drivers, and let's do something here. And those are going to be, I think, milestone announcements that are going to have an impact on the industry.
It's going to be a very, very bright year for autonomy in 2025. Things are going to continue to scale. When you look at scale, we have data now from the California Public Utilities Commission. Waymo is currently operating 300 vehicles in San Francisco, 100 vehicles in Los Angeles. This is dated reporting, but it came out this week from the California Public Utilities Commission. The California Public Utilities Commission also reported that Waymo's ridership grew 50% between May and August, with Waymo successfully completing over 143,000 rides in May and over 312,000 rides in August. The next report comes out on January 1st, 2025. What do you expect and we're going to see?
In terms of those numbers, well, I hope the car numbers go up dramatically. I don't know if they are. I don't know if wait times have significantly changed. Obviously, they're going to need to get more in LA. So maybe San Fran stays pat, LA goes up, and then they have to allocate inventory elsewhere. Maybe they're waiting for the new models, as you suggested, for Miami in 2026 with some of the new models that are planned. But we're already on the books for some predictions in terms of mileage. So now I think it's just waiting to see when they go to new markets and when they open up some of these freeways. And in the case of Tesla, when the autonomy market, the first one is announced, if there is one. And do you have a prediction for that if that occurs, wherever it is in the world?
For what, international market?
Any market in the world where a Tesla fleet is trialed as like a robo-taxi fleet, even if it includes a safety driver, rather than just personal car usage.
Beijing or Wuhan, China.
Wouldn't this be an embarrassment to his buddy, the president of the United States, for his first trial to be in China? Like, Trump will be like, why are you doing it there? Give it to me here.
First international?
No. I didn't say international. I said first market anywhere in the world where, I think, again, originally, it's not going to be like, well, maybe it is. Maybe there's never going to be a fleet, but I think it would add more credibility, further the cause of Tesla and the development and even the adoption of end users. If you just got a fleet, go to a city, whether it's Palo Alto or Wuhan or wherever it is, and say, okay, we're going to do, an autonomous fleet in this market. Maybe we'll have a safety driver in there, and then getting to the point without a safety driver. But you would think that could be the next step. Maybe not. Maybe it's only about getting the car to a point where the owners, individual users, are just going to use it for autonomous purposes.
Cybercab's coming for U.S. launch, not international launch. Is probably most likely, all signs point to, Austin, Texas, and the surrounding suburbs around Austin. That's Harris County, just purely based on the testing, the Gigafactory being in there. And I will throw a curveball at it. I would say Miami will be one of the early markets for Tesla. The Cybercab's going to Art Basel. There's a lot of density there that makes a lot of sense. And it's a cool looking car. It fits into the Miami vibe. So I'm going to say Austin is clearly the favorite to be the launch market for the Cybercab. I would say Miami will be one of the first 4 to 5 markets.
When?
Well, it's going to depend on what President Trump does. If we get a federal framework signed into law in late 25, early 26.
But you don't need a federal framework. I mean, you could go to Austin today. Like if the product was ready, you're telling me that the state of Texas or the state of Florida is not going to allow him to run an autonomous fleet? You don't need a national framework for that.
No, but to go over state lines, if you run it in a constrained ODD, yes.
I'm not saying state lines. Look, it's a seminal moment if, Tesla just did Austin, just like Waymo's just doing San Francisco and just doing LA. If they just went to Austin and offered this, look, maybe it starts with a gigafactory and just taking employees around, kind of, that's half-assed. Give me something in Austin where I can go download the app and hop in the cars. Like, that is going to be a seminal moment for Tesla if they decide to go that route. A, do you think they will? And B, if they do, when is that going to happen?
Yes, they will. 2027 to 2028.
So we're a little ways off. I'm going to take the under on that.
You're probably right. I'm being super conservative on that.
Isn't this odd? You're supposed to be the Tesla stan, I think, as your critics call it. And I'm going to talk out my, where, and just say it's going to be earlier than 2027. Not necessarily because they're ready, just because I think that's the nature of the beast with the company. We'll see what happens.
If they're ready, investors will continue to cheer. And the Trump bump will continue in the Tesla stock.
Oh my God. I mean, that's going to be a big event for sure.
What happens on Tesla's next earnings? Because the way that this stock is run up, it's just, you've got to hit a Babe Ruth size home run to even meet investor expectations.
I mean, the other news we didn't talk about here, I think it was this week, maybe it was last week, the judge once again preventing Elon from collecting a bonus that shareholders have already agreed upon. And people may be outraged and everything else, but look, the underlying thing here is if this continues, and you're Elon and you're thinking about how your technology is developing and where you're putting the value of autonomy, why would you put it in a Delaware-based company where you're not able to fully benefit versus other companies that you formulated where you can effectively park this technology and license it out to other companies? That's the ultimate risk here, which ultimately hurts the shareholders. But I'm not blaming the shareholders. The shareholders want to pay him what was agreed upon. It's a crazy situation that I think, look, I'm giving you the fear factor of it. The reality is this is going to go up the chain of courts, and ultimately I think they will be victorious. They meaning Elon and Tesla shareholders who have voted to approve this twice. But I think that's maybe that thing will come up, and we'll gauge whether, how pissy is Elon about this on the call about that issue, or whether he just kind of shrugs it off and like, don't worry guys, we'll take care of this, and full steam ahead.
It's a huge risk. One, he could put the technology in XAI and license it. And then I think it's a bigger risk for the state of Delaware for their registered agent business, for their legal business. It's going to be destroyed. You're seeing all the stuff. Bill Gurley's leading a call. A lot of these investors and some partners at Sequoia are saying, move all your startups out of Delaware. If all those businesses leave Delaware, Delaware's economy is going to get hamstringed. It's going to get a Mike Tyson in the prime, not the Jake Paul right hook.
Yes, it's a fascinating thing, but I think in this case, it's really just a one judge issue, and kind of underscores a lot of things that have been occurring. Why don't we move on to May Mobility and finish off? We won't spend a lot of time on this, but what's the news with May Mobility?
May Mobility continues to expand in Japan, and we have Edwin Olson coming on the Road to Autonomy podcast next week for recording. We'll release that in a few weeks. Edwin's a very smart gentleman, a really great engineer, and I've said this to Edwin in private, and he kind of smiles, but I'm going to say this publicly. At some point, I believe that May Mobility will become a Japanese company with multiple deployments in Japan, and I say that with the two largest shareholders in their cap table being NTT, a very large telco company, going to telco corner your house, and Toyota. May Mobility has got the Toyota e-Pallet ramped up, running at a Toyota factory in Japan. It's the first step towards May truly expanding to which I believe will be multiple deployments, both in controlled corporate environments and on-road environments. The other big company to watch in Japan that we haven't discussed a lot here, watch Applied Intuition. They have a very bright future in Japan.
So just to be clear, when you say, at the factory, this toaster oven, Zoox looking like e-pallet product is not going to be on the streets of Japan. It's going to be within the corporate campus of Toyota, correct? So it's nice. And it's also interesting that you're so positive about this, again, given the form factor, going back to episodes 1 through 5, where we've debated your distaste for the form factor of the Zoox, and this is in fact the same form factor. Although this has nothing to do with May Mobility, this is just May Mobility's technology on the form factor of the Toyota e-Pallet.
Not bullish on the form factor. I'm bullish on May Mobility's prospects in Japan.
That's fair.
I'm bullish on May Mobility's relationship with Toyota, because reading the tea leaves, there's something more cooking there. And I think that's why that with NTT's capital and Toyota's capital and engineering and vehicles, there's something bigger brewing in that Japanese market, especially as Isuzu moves in to autonomy in that market as well. And let's not forget about Tier 4.
Not to go too off the rails here, but underscores maybe Wave's approach to the market, which is like, let's just develop good technology. and then figure out the OEM partners and be the technology that the OEM partners use. Because there's two parts of the market here, right? There's the robo-taxi side, and then there's the personal ownership side. I mean, I don't know, like we could debate the long term there. There's certainly always going to be a market for personal ownership. And like, who knows what happens 50 years from now? Maybe everyone has or personally owns an autonomous car that goes out and runs their messages or gets their deliveries and does everything for them. And it just reduces the need for fleets in general. Or maybe it's the opposite, which is like, no, the fleets are going to be so good and ubiquitous and clean that personal ownership is going to contract to maybe just, one and in many cases zero cars. But that's a longer term debate that I think will extend beyond my time on this earth.
I don't know about that, but you said a key word. You said good technology. Well, the hat says make autonomy great. It's great technology. We got to get that good. It's not good developing good technology. It's developing great technology. We had a great week in the autonomy markets this week. Are we going to have a great week next week, or what do we need to look for?
Not a huge week, but we're kind of in the conference season. I believe that Uber and Lyft on Wednesday will be speaking at an investor conference in San Francisco. They will undoubtedly be asked if there's a Q&A session about Waymo's new announcements. So it'll be interesting to get their updated perspectives on that. And particularly in the case of Lyft, who still doesn't have yet a partnership with Waymo.
Lyft, the time to do an autonomy deal is now. You got the credit card deal figured out. You've got Chase, JP Morgan. Uber has American Express. They have various autonomy deals with Waymo. It's time to get your deals. Time to compete. Time to do it. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is Waymo. Walt, until next week.